Ted Bundy, one of the worst serial killers, died doing what he did best: manipulating. In the days leading up to his execution, Bundy appeared calm and cooperative. He spent hours with investigators confessing to more than 30 murders committed between 1974 and 1978, although most people believe the actual number was much higher. He offered unbearable details, but without showing remorse, keeping what he knew as bargaining chips he would never use. Because even on the brink of death, Bundy kept manipulating, releasing half-truths and hiding even darker ones. Everything was part of his strategy to buy time, but this time, there was no deal to negotiate. At 7 in the morning, Bundy was escorted to the execution chamber of the Florida State Prison, and after being strapped to the wooden chair, electrodes were attached to his leg and scalp. In the room, journalists, officials, and family members of the victims held their breath. His last words were simple: "Give my love to my family and friends." When the electrical current was activated, 2,000 volts passed through his body for almost a minute. The smell of burnt material filled the room. At 7:16, a prison doctor declared him dead. He was 42 years old. Outside, a crowd of 2,000 people was celebrating by waving banners, launching fireworks, and chanting songs. The man who once manipulated judges, juries, and victims was finally gone. Herman Webster Mudgett. When the rope was placed around his neck and the trapdoor opened beneath his feet, the crowd thought it was all over, but it wasn't. Herman had spent years deceiving and swindling anyone who crossed his path. But what made him a macabre legend was not just his crimes, but the setting where he committed them. During the World's Fair in Chicago, in the year 1893, Holmes built a 3-story building that would later be nicknamed the Castle of Horror. From the outside, it looked like a regular hotel. Inside, it hid a maze with corridors that led nowhere. Soundproof secret rooms, chutes to dispose of bodies, disguised gas chambers, and a basement equipped with a dissection table. Herman admitted to killing 27 people, although it is suspected that there could have been more than 200. Finally, he was caught for killing a business partner during an insurance scam. On the morning of his execution, he ate eggs and dry toast and thanked the guards for their courtesy. When asked if he had any last words, he calmly denied committing any crime, taking responsibility only for 2 accidents. Nobody believed him. On the 7th of May, 1896, at the prison of Moyamensing, Philadelphia, a rope was placed around his neck and the trapdoor was activated. But the fall did not break his neck. Instead of a quick death, he began to suffocate slowly. The witnesses said he neither moved nor struggled. He just hung there motionless, as if he were waiting for something. Almost 20 minutes passed before the doctors confirmed he no longer had a pulse. What came next was part of his plan. He requested that his body be buried 3 meters underground, inside a coffin sealed with cement to prevent exhumation. For some reason, the prison agreed, and his body was encased under layers of concrete. When his tomb was exhumed over a century later for DNA testing, his mustache was still intact. Jeffrey Dahmer was serving 16 life sentences at the Columbia Correctional Institution, Wisconsin. When he was imprisoned, many believed it was the end. But what no one imagined was that his death would be even more brutal than his own crimes. He had murdered 17 men and boys using brutal methods between 1978 and 1991. And even though he tried to keep a low profile in prison, he couldn't help but make morbid jokes about his victims. This made him a silent target, and someone was already watching. On November 28th of that year, Dahmer was assigned to clean the gym's bathroom with 2 other inmates, Jesse Anderson and Christopher Scarver. There were no cameras or guards, just a 10-minute routine. When the staff returned, they found Dahmer on the floor with his skull crushed, Anderson barely conscious, Scarver standing, still holding the metal bar. What he said next left the officers frozen. He claimed that God had ordered him to do it. Dahmer was moved to a hospital, but died an hour later from blunt trauma at only 34 years old. His body was cremated as he had requested, but there was one final detail that sparked a last fight between his parents. Dahmer's brain had been preserved for scientific study, until it was destroyed forever at the request of his parents. The one whose brain they could study was John Wayne Gacy, also known as Pogo the Clown. Gacy's execution did not go as planned. And when there was a problem with the intravenous line, his end lasted much longer than expected. He spent the day praying with a Catholic priest. For his last meal, he ordered a bucket of fried chicken from KFC, fries, breaded shrimp, strawberries, and a Diet Coke. Not even in his last moments did he want to risk sugar. It was May 1994, and outside the prison, large crowds gathered to celebrate the end of a man who had murdered 33 young people and children. Shortly after midnight, Gacy was strapped to a gurney in the execution chamber. He seemed calm and even joked with the guards. His last words were, "Kiss my ass." 2 intravenous lines were inserted to administer a sequence of 3 substances designed to take effect in a few minutes. But at the crucial moment, something went wrong. One of the intravenous lines got blocked. What was supposed to last a few minutes turned into a wait of 18 interminable minutes, with technicians sweating, searching for another vein, while Gacy remained awake, paralyzed, and conscious. Witnesses described the scene as tense and awkward. Some journalists labeled it as a failed execution, comparing it to amateur surgery. When the flow resumed, he closed his eyes and remained silent. At 12:58, a prison official declared him dead. He was 52 years old. His brain was removed for study, but nothing special was found. Richard Ramirez. Richard Ramirez, known as the Night Stalker, never made it to the gas chamber. Something else took him first. He was given a death sentence in 1989 for 13 murders committed in California during the mid-80s. But the appeals process dragged on for years. During that time, his life was not exactly miserable. He married a journalist who had written to him in prison and continued to receive letters from obsessed admirers. Then, in 2013, his health deteriorated drastically. He was diagnosed with B-cell lymphoma, a type of cancer. The disease spread quickly to the liver and lymph nodes, causing liver failure and secondary infections. He also suffered from chronic hepatitis C and complications from decades of illicit substance abuse. He was transferred to a hospital unit within the prison system, where his condition worsened even more. He developed sores, chronic fatigue, and severe jaundice. Those who saw him near the end said he looked decades older than his age. Waxy skin, very thin hair, and a visibly sunken face. At 9:10 in the morning on June 7th, 2013, Richard Ramirez died of liver failure caused by lymphoma. She was 53 years old, and no family claimed her body. Eileen Wuornos begged the state to execute her. For her last day, she had spent more than a decade on death row for killing 7 men between 1989 and 1990. His last years were marked by erratic behavior and conspiracy claims. In a letter to the court, he wrote, "I am sane. Allow me my execution." He dismissed his lawyers. He accused the prison staff of mistreatment and told reporters that he believed the government wanted to see her dead. In her final days, she refused the last meal and instead asked for a simple cup of coffee. On the morning of October 9th, 2002, she quietly entered the execution chamber. Witnesses claimed she showed no emotion as they strapped her to the gurney. When asked if she had any last words, she said she would return to life with Jesus. At 9:47, the lethal injection started. Within minutes, her breathing slowed down. She closed her eyes, and at 9:53, she was declared dead. Charles Manson, compared to his fame and legacy larger than life itself. The death of Charles Manson was quite simple. By then, he had spent almost 50 years in prison, serving multiple life sentences for orchestrating the 1969 murders, known as the Tate LaBianca case. He was one of the oldest inmates in the California prison system. In early 2017, his health began to decline. He was hospitalized several times for intestinal bleeding and other complications. The doctors determined that he was suffering from advanced stage colon cancer and organ failure, but was too weak to undergo surgery. In his final days, he was moved under custody from the state prison of Corcoran to a hospital ward, where he remained conscious but very fragile. The staff described him as quiet, and there were no official last words. At 8:13 p.m. on November 19, 2017, Charles Manson died of cardiac arrest, with respiratory failure and metastatic cancer as contributing causes. He was 83 years old. His body was later cremated, following a legal battle between his grandson and another man who claimed to be his son, Andrei Chikatilo. After 12 years of terror and 2 years of trial, the death of Andrei Chikatilo lasted less than a second. This Russian murderer was convicted for 52 murders committed between 1978 and 1990. During the trial, he often shouted, laughed, and even exposed himself in front of the jury. But once he was found guilty and sentenced, he calmed down and behaved. He spent his last months in solitary confinement at Novosibirsk prison, quiet and detached. He rarely spoke to the guards. The morning of February 14, 1994, he was taken from his cell without prior warning. He probably didn't know that it would be his last day. The Russian authorities did not give execution dates in advance, and once his appeals were exhausted, took him to a small soundproof room. He was ordered to kneel, was aimed at the back of the head, and boom. That was the end, at 57 years old. There were no witnesses apart from the officials present and the man who carried out the order. Chikatilo's body was buried in an unmarked grave. The government did not reveal its exact location, so no one really knows where it is. Albert Fish was convicted for the murder of a 10-year-old girl whom he lured from her home, a crime that exposed a life filled with even more horrific acts. Fish claimed his actions were commanded by God and told psychiatrists he hoped his execution would bring him salvation. The state took care of the former. The latter was no longer in his hands. On his last night alive, in Sing Sing prison in Ossining, New York, on January 16, 1936, he was calm as the guards led him to the electric chair. Witnesses noted that he even helped the executioner adjust the straps and showed no signs of fear. When asked if he had any last words, he supposedly said, "I don't even know why I'm here." Although, of course, for everyone present, the reason was quite clear. At 11 o'clock and 6 minutes in the evening, the first electric shock was applied. The current passed in several cycles of between 30 and 60 seconds and was repeated. 3 minutes later, he was no longer alive. It was said that the execution required 2 discharges, although the authorities never confirmed whether it was due to technical problems or the resistance of his body. The doctor who examined him stated that his death was instantaneous, although some witnesses believed it lasted longer than usual. His body was buried in Potter's Field on Hart Island, New York, as it was not claimed by anyone. Harold Shipman was a highly respected family doctor in England for decades, known for his calm demeanor and impeccable record. When he was arrested in 1998, investigators believed he had killed more than 200 of his patients, making him one of the most notorious killers in modern history. He used his position as a doctor to administer lethal doses of painkillers, signing many of the death certificates himself. He was convicted in the year 2000 for the murder of 15 people and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of release in Wakefield Prison. On the morning of January 13, 2004, the guards found him lying in his cell. He had used a sheet which he tied to the bars of the window. He was 57 years old and left no note. According to the prison staff, he showed no signs of distress or psychosis issues. Some speculated that he chose the timing of his death to prevent his wife from losing her pension, which could have been revoked if he lived past the age of 60 years. Elizabeth Bathory. When the guards finally checked Elizabeth Bathory's cell on the 21st of August, 1614, they found her lying on the floor, cold and lifeless. After 4 years of isolation, not even her jailers were sure when she had stopped breathing. Known in legends as the Blood Countess, Bathory was accused of committing heinous acts against dozens of young women in her castle in Hungary between the years 1590 and 1610. The exact number of victims remains uncertain. Official records mention about 80, but some later accounts talk of hundreds. In 1610, King Matthias II ordered her arrest. Unlike her accomplices, who were executed, she was never put on trial. She was sentenced to life imprisonment, confined within a set of sealed-off rooms in the castle of Chikatilo. The food was passed to her through a small opening. Over time, her health deteriorated. It was said that she complained about her confinement, worsened by the cold, isolation, and darkness. By the year 1614, she could no longer stand. One morning, she told a guard that she felt sick. The next day, she was dead. She was buried on the castle grounds, but later her body was secretly moved to a family crypt, possibly to avoid her grave being vandalized. The woman who, according to legend, bathed in blood, died completely alone in total darkness behind a wall at Gein. Despite having killed several women and having desecrated graves in local cemeteries to exhume corpses, Gein was never executed. In 1957, when the authorities in Plainfield, Wisconsin, were investigating the disappearance of a local woman, they searched the property of Gein, and the quiet farmer's house turned out to be one of the worst things in the history of murder. Gein had made household items and clothes using human skin and body parts, including skulls used as bowls and furniture made of human skin. He was declared legally insane and sent to the Central State Hospital for Criminals with Mental Illnesses in Waupun, Wisconsin. He was later transferred to the Mendota Mental Health Institute. In July of 1984, he was admitted to St. Mary Hospital after experiencing respiratory problems and weight loss. The doctors diagnosed him with advanced lung cancer. His condition worsened quickly. For several weeks, he remained under observation, frequently sedated and drifting in and out of consciousness. The nurses described him as polite, but almost always silent, murmuring brief responses when spoken to. He passed away on July 26, 1984, at the age of 77, due to respiratory failure secondary to cancer. For once, Gein was buried normally. He was laid to rest in Plainsfield Cemetery next to his mother. His tombstone was stolen and vandalized several times until it was finally removed permanently. Don't forget to support this type of content by subscribing and watching this other very interesting video that you will love.